So welcome family, welcome friends, welcome everyone who knew Irwin Williams Stevens, or as many of us just call him Steve. If you knew Steve, then I know you loved him. And you loved him, and then right now you miss him. That can make this a difficult time. Maybe there's kind of a numbness that kind of hovers over everything. But there's comfort. There's comfort in a God who loves us, comfort in a God who is always with us. And we'll see His truth as we read from Psalm 23, a very familiar passage. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever."
It is well with
peace. When it is well, their soul is not well with their soul because of any human effort, but because of God's amazing grace reaching down to us. So in that amazing grace, we celebrate the life of Steve. We're honored to be a part of that. So your days with him are a gift. A few of you in this room spent many days with him. One of those people is Robert, so Robert's got some stories. This is Steve's son. So share about his father.
First of all, thank you very much for being here and honoring and celebrating my dad with us. It's an incredible honor. The great legendary baseball sage Yogi Berra once said, "Always go to your friends' funerals, otherwise they won't come to yours." Humor is going to be my defense mechanism. So, 2002, my mom called, and after exchanging pleasantries, I could tell something wasn't right, and she just wanted me to know. Some test results had come back, and my dad had prostate cancer. So she didn't want us to worry, so everything's going to be fine. That day I went out on a run, and I began to prepare what I would say for you on the stage. So I've had 11 years to prepare for this, but much of what I'm going to say was already in my head that day. Some of it has been added. We didn't know the results yet. We had to wait for another week. We came down to San Antonio. My older sister Linda and I, it was on her birthday on January 29th. We were in the doctor's office. And where we were in the office, we could hear what sounded like wailing and weeping and wailing. It was hard to tell. And Linda and I looked and said, "That's Dad? That doesn't sound like him. It's out of character." Turns out it was the doctor who was laughing uncontrollably. My dad was cutting jokes during his cancer conversation. The doctor informed him that his treatments would require hormones, in which he responded, "Does that mean I'm going to start driving like a woman? Am I going to start singing soprano? Am I going to start wearing a brassiere?" These are the kinds of things he was saying, and the doctor was slapping his knee. It was hilarious. The doctor did inform us it was a very aggressive tumor. However, he felt like he could manage it, and we would have much more time with him, which we had 11 more years. He died exactly 11 years later. On January the 28th. So, if I look down most of the time, please don't be offended. And I am ticklish. I've given the pastor permission to tickle me if I break down, so I break out the tickle fight with the pastor. Irwin William Stevens was born on July the 15th, 1927 in Tonga, Oklahoma. His parents were Carl Spurgeon Stevens and Gladys Stevens. With a middle name like Spurgeon, you can imagine what he was going to go up to be. He was a minister. He was a Baptist minister, and we're very proud and thankful for the legacy of faith that's been passed down. His older brother Paul is here with his wife Joy from Austin. His younger brother James with his wife Barbara from Alvin. His brother Carl and wife Sean from Nacogdoches. His brother Charles and wife Marty from San Antonio. And his sister Lou and husband Johnny from Columbus, Georgia. He's predeceased by his parents and his younger sister Dolores. Dolores' children are here as well from Mississippi, my cousin Marshall and my cousin Sue. My dad never liked his name. He could never understand how a second-born child out of 7 would get the name Irwin, while his younger kids would get the normal names like Charles and James and Carl. They moved around a lot as his dad changed churches. One day, he was in a new town. It was his first day of class in 2nd grade, and another kid in class said, "What's your name?" He said, "Well, that's none of your business." This remark resulted in an altercation in which their fisticuffs were exchanged. At some point in his life, he picked up the nickname Steve and was known as that for the rest of his life. He developed a very strong work ethic at a young age. While in high school, he worked 40 hours a week so he could make extra money for the family. He was a bellhop. And at the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, he once carried the bags of Julie Garland. That's what it says there. But he did this so that he could raise extra money for the family. He helped pay for most of my Aunt Lou's piano lessons. And this pattern of working hard and being willing to sacrifice for his family is a pattern that lasted for the rest of his life. As a senior in high school, he tried out and made the football team at Mineral Wells High School. When I would ask him as a kid, what position did you play? He'd say, well, I played end guard and tackle. I sat on the end of the bench, I guarded the water bucket, and I would tackle anyone who tried to get water without the coach's permission. I was in kindergarten and I took his picture with me. I was so proud to show and tell the football team, and I said, my dad played football for Mineral Wells High School. And the kids would say, well, what position did he play? Of course, I would say, that's none of your business. After high school, he served in the United States Navy, in which he was on the GI Bill. This allowed him to pay for his college. He attended the University of Florida, where he graduated with a degree in pharmacy. When I was in college, he used to brag to me that he only made one B his entire college career. There was one semester where I was really struggling. It was my worst semester. So you can imagine the shame and the disgrace when I had to inform him that I too will only be making one B. After college, he did serve time in the United States Navy on a battleship as a pharmacist. He was honorably discharged, and he worked as a pharmacist his entire career. He worked for several retail pharmacies and hospital pharmacies. He went to work for the VA hospital in Houston. He retired from the VA hospital in San Antonio in 1996. He was immediately handed a honeydew list for my mom. It seemed like every time I came home, the house was different and changed. He did go back to work, and he worked for the University Health System for about 5 years. He finally decided to hang up his mortal and pestle. My mom wanted me to say mortal and pestle. But his entire career, he was an extremely hard worker, incredibly responsible, incredibly diligent. Under no circumstances would he have ever called in sick to go play golf or anything like that. When he retired, he had over a year of sick leave, unused sick leave that they paid him. Not once did I ever hear him complain about his job. Not once did I ever complain about how much money he made. Not once did I ever hear him complain or gossip about a coworker or his boss. I asked my mom the other day, did you ever once hear him say anything bad about anyone ever? And she thought about it and said no. One of my favorite books is More Than Enough by Dave Ramsey. And in front of the book it says, money means nothing to the man who has more than enough. My dad had more than enough because he had the gift of contentment. He's a very content man. He's also very diligent. There was a commercial when I was a kid that said that in the United States Army, we do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. I used to think as a kid, my dad does more before 9 a.m. than the Army does all day. By the time we woke up, the yard was mowed, the laundry was done, the dishes were done, there was food waiting for us, and the first thing he would say is, hurry up, get in here, so I can get this kitchen cleaned up. He was a bachelor for a long time. When you ask him about his bachelor days, he would always say, well, I spent most of my money on whiskey, wine, and women, and the rest I just wasted. In the fall of 1963, he attended a church service at Park Place Baptist Church, where he met my mom. They were introduced by a friend. He called her and he asked her on a date. She originally declined because she had papers to grade. I never heard that one before. Second time he called, she accepted his offer. He proposed to her on Valentine's Day, and they were married June 6, 1964. When I asked him about it, I said, well, did you introduce yourself as Irwin? And he would say, well, you wouldn't be here right now if I didn't introduce myself. When he tells the story about how he got married, he said he'd been single for a long time, and he decided to get married, so he got out several sheets of paper and wrote down the names of all his girlfriends, put them in a hat, shook it up, pulled out a name, and she won. He also said that she must have really been ready to get married because her younger sister was already married, so he called her and he says, may I speak to Ann? This is Ann. Hi Ann, will you marry me? Of course. Who is this? He actually did pretty well because my mom spent some time with Kenny Rogers. They both attended the University of Houston, and he would come over to my grandmother's house and my mom would play piano for him while he sang. So I asked my mom, you could have married Kenny Rogers? And my dad would say, not so fast. Once again, you would not be here. On January of 1966, my sister Linda was born. I was born in December of 1968. My younger sister was born, Diane was born in April 1971. My dad was extremely loyal and committed to his family. He made countless sacrifices for us and for my mom. Countless memories of the things he did for us. I don't have enough time to even scratch the surface. But let me just say, not once did I ever remember him saying he was too busy. The song Cats in the Cradle does not resonate with me and my sisters. My older sister's going to share some stories, but she does remember how he'd get home at the same time every day. And I remember that as well. You know, around the driveway, and we'd often have a Hot Wheels car or something like that. We were the envy of the neighborhood back in Houston. There's a lot of places he took us. The Circus, the Harlem Globetrotters, the Astros, and the neighborhood kids noticed and said, your dad is cool, your dad is awesome. He was my catcher on the side of the house when I was a little pitcher. I remember running down the sidewalk next to me when I was learning to ride my bike. He was at every single game. We often filmed him. There's one game where I scored a layup, an uncontested layup, so I scored 2 points. And he watched that layup over and over and over. Took us on vacations, multiple vacations, and went out of his way to make sure that they were memorable. Every Christmas and birthday was memorable. And of course, he and my mother took us to church every Sunday with no exceptions. One of the greatest compliments given to my dad is by my friend David. David met his dad for the first time when he was 22 years old. He sent him a letter and said, I'd like to meet you. His dad came to San Antonio, they spent a few days together. His dad left, he never heard from him again. David now has 5 kids. He coaches several teams, he's at every game, he's at every practice, and Sunday is family day. When I commended him for what a great dad he is, he said, I didn't have a model. Your dad is my model. He was very committed to my mom. When preparing this, I was trying to remember if I can think of one time where he ever mistreated her as my sisters. We can't remember. Not once did he ever raise his voice at her. Not once did he ever use inappropriate language. Not once did we ever see him disrespect her. We never had to question one time if anything he said was ever true. If integrity is the strict adherence to truthfulness, my dad had an enormous amount of integrity. It's incredibly honest. It never crossed our minds for 1 second. I confirmed this with my older sister and with my mom, and I know my younger sister feels the same. There was never 1 second where it ever entered our minds that there's a remote possibility that he would ever abandon his family or betray my mother. That never entered our minds once. However, there was the time in November of 1976 when he came home and he confessed to my mother that he had voted for Jimmy Carter. I know. He walked into the house and she immediately said, "What did you vote for?" And he sheepishly said, "I thought we agreed not to discuss this." Once he admitted his transgression, and you have to understand this was an egregious transgression, she said, "You've got to be kidding me." And then she even tried to play the "What kind of a man are you" card. What kind of a man counts out the vote of his own wife? He tried to explain. She immediately sent him to his room. She went back there and closed the door, and we're not sure what happened in that room that day, but I assure you, he never counted out a vote ever again. But the question of what kind of a man are you was answered by my mom a few days ago. The pastors came over to the house to plan the service, and this is a quote from my mom. "He never disrespected me one time in 48 years. He never raised his voice one time in 48 years. Many times I felt like I didn't deserve him. I won the lottery." I think it was very fitting. After he died, we were in the room, my sisters and my mom, we were in the room with him, saying our goodbyes. My mother kissed him on the forehead and said, through tears, "I love you. I thank you for everything you've done for me and the way you treated me." My dad had a great sense of humor. As a little kid, I remember every time he'd take me to go to the restroom, he'd always say, "Stand close. The next person may be barefooted." When my dad would get flustered, he would say, "Oh, rats." And I said, "Dad, why do you say rats?" And he would say, "Well, why curse when you can say rats?" In July of last year, he had declined. He wasn't completely helpless, but he was almost completely helpless, and the roles had reversed, and I was now taking him to go potty. We flew to Los Angeles for treatment. We were in the Los Angeles airport. I took him into the restroom, wheeled him in, helped him stand up, got him situated. I reminded him, Dad, stay close. The next person may be barefooted. I backed off and waited, and waited, and waited. And then my dad yells out, "Oh, rats!" He wasn't standing close enough. When I turned 16, he announces that he's got a car for me to drive. And he shows up in a 1974 green Malibu. My friend Joey is here. He remembers that day. Joey was laughing. I wanted to cry. So I had to go to my dad and said, "Okay, Dad, this is not, seriously, this is not going to work. I'm 16 now. I'm kind of a big deal. And I can't be driving a green 1974 Malibu." And he would have none of it. He said, "Son, I'm doing you a favor. If you can find you a girl to go out with you in this car, she really likes you. You'll thank me later." That little nugget of wisdom I've carried ever since. I've been driving a piece of junk ever since. He also told me, before you get married, always check your teeth. You should never buy a horse without checking its teeth. And always get a recent picture of our mama, he would say. I'm assuming some of you are wondering why I'm still single. Lastly, my dad was very, very consistent. The other great compliment that he received was, we were attending church in their road community church, and the pastor was giving a sermon on Galatians 5, the fruits of the Spirit. In the life of a believer, these 9 characteristics should either be developed or developing, these should be manifest. They are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, and self-control. We got back to the house, and someone observed, and they mentioned that as they heard that sermon, they thought of my dad. And they told him, "We have all 9 of those." And he did. Abraham Lincoln encourages us to live in the better interests of our nature. This was his nature. Every day, all day, day after day, year after year, the same man you saw was the same man that we saw when no one else was looking. There was no sacrifice he was not willing to make. I could have called him at 3 in the morning with any issue, he would have been on his way before I hung the phone up. My friends would marvel at his ability to remain so even-keeled and calm under any circumstances. Almost impossible to get him rattled. And this was the case even as he suffered and as the prognosis got worse and worse. 2 weeks ago, Stan Musial of the St. Louis Cardinals was buried, and Bob Costas did his eulogy, and he challenged the crowd. Who was the single person that would have something negative to say about Stan? I think you could say the same thing about my dad. It would be almost impossible to find anybody that have something negative to say about him. I obviously think very highly of him. I'm very proud of him. The last year as he started to decline, it was unbearable for me to watch. It's my highest honor to serve him and to be there in his greatest time of need, and there's nowhere else on earth I would rather have been. But it was the most horrific. There were times where it was the most awful, horrific thing I've ever seen or experienced. I've never wished it on my worst enemy. The Friday before he died, a week ago on Friday, I was paralyzed with anguish again. I was so sick and tired of seeing him suffer. It was hard to walk, it was hard to talk, I couldn't function. And I certainly wasn't going to pray. I was pretty fed up, to be honest, and I felt like I had a sense, some people would call it a prompting, where God puts a thought in your mind, that I felt like I needed to read something. And I knew it was either in 1st or 2nd Corinthians. I'd read before, but I opened up and this is what I read. Someone may ask, how will the dead be brought back to life again? What kind of bodies will they have? What a foolish question. You will find the answer in your own garden. When you put a seed into the ground, it doesn't grow into a plant until it dies first. When the green shoot comes up out of the seed, it's very different from the seed you first planted. For all you put in the ground is a dry little seed of wheat or whatever it is you are planting. And God gives it a beautiful new body. In the same way, our earthly bodies, which die and decay, are different from the bodies we will have when we come back to life, for they will never die. The bodies we have now embarrass us, for they become sick and die, but they will be full of glory when we come back to life again. Yes, there are weak, dying bodies now, but when we live again, we'll be full of strength. I tell you this, my brothers, an earthly body made of flesh and blood cannot get into God's kingdom. These perishable bodies of ours are not the right kind to live forever. Many of you are familiar with C.S. Lewis, and he would refer to death and the grave as a turnstile that we all have to walk through. And on the other side of the turnstile is real living, where we're given bodies that never die, that never suffer, where there is no decay. When I read this, there was a shift in my heart, and my prayers changed. As I thought about this, the only way for my dad to experience this legacy, it has to go into the ground and die first. And at that point, I began to ask myself, why would I not want that for my dad? Selfishly, I wanted to keep him around for another 15 years. But why would I not want him to get to experience what's on the other side of that turnstile? The text goes on to say, when this happens, the scripture will come true. Death is swallowed up in victory. Death, where's your victory? Where's your sting? The sting that causes death will all be gone. And it's in that moment that I did feel peace about the thought of losing my dad. 2 days later on Sunday, I had the overwhelming feeling that I needed to go tell him a couple things. I still didn't know that this was the end, but I grabbed his hand and I said, I'm proud of you, and you're a good dad. And he said, huh? And I said, I'm proud of you, and you're a good dad. And he said, in his typical humble self, he said, well, thank you. He brushed it off. Monday morning, I woke up, and I was doing my morning reading, and the first thing I read was, this is a book that my sister gave me. I opened up the book, and this is the first thing I read that morning. Entrust your loved ones to me. Release them into my protective care. They are much safer with me than in your clinging hands. My presence will go with them wherever they go, and I will give them rest. And then he died 3 hours later. So, yes, as a family, we are heartbroken, hearts ache. This is, collectively we cried enough tears to open our own water park. But make no mistake, this is a celebration. And the skeptic may say, then why didn't God heal him? My answer to you is, he has been healed. My dad is restored and whole. So I want to close by asking my sisters, your children to stand. There's a quote by Dave Ramsey that says, the way you measure your wealth is you add up everything in your life that you would never exchange for money. If that's the definition of wealth, the people standing before you may be as wealthy as anyone's ever lived. We had the privilege of having a world-class dad and granddad. So the torch is passed, been passed, the bar is high, and may we live out the rest of our days worthy of being his children and grandchildren. I'm going to ask a second group of people to stand, but before I do, a couple years ago I got to hear David Robinson speak, and someone from the audience asked, how do you define success? He says, success is fulfilling your calling, fulfilling the calling you've received. If that's the definition of success, I think my dad was very successful, and I would like to demonstrate that then. If you've ever personally experienced the qualities that I mentioned today, his meekness, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, self-control, his honesty, his faithfulness to his family, and you've been touched, impacted, inspired, shaped in any way, and your life has been enriched because of him, either directly or indirectly, through his legacy that he shaped, I would like to ask you to stand as well. My dad was a man of few words, but he impacted people, he impacted his life by the way he lived. He was fond of saying, actions speak louder than words. A couple of years ago, I went hiking in Yosemite National Park with a couple of friends that are here, through a grove of sequoia trees. And they're the largest living organism in the world, and I hiked to the top of the grove, and there is a sign that says, what does it take to become a giant sequoia tree? And they have to, there's a seed, obviously, that has to fall into the ground and die as well. But the last thing that was listed on what it takes to become a full-grown sequoia is another sequoia tree has to die. As you're hiking, you'll see a large tree like this laying on the ground. When it dies, it releases nutrients that gives life to the other trees in the grove and allows them to become full-grown sequoia trees. A great sequoia has fallen among us, and we are the grove. The life that we lived and modeled, it enriches our lives and inspires us. Who you are and who you become remain once you're gone, once you're on the other side of that turnstile. So it matters the way you live your life. The way you treat people matters. Your commitment and your faithfulness to your family matters. Your character matters, your integrity matters, your kindness matters. The seemingly insignificant acts of sacrifice you do for others, they matter. The way you love people, both in word and actions, it matters. So may we all be reminded of this and be inspired about the rest of our days in such a way so when it's our turn to walk through this turnstile, the people who remain in the grove will be able to say about us the same things that were said today about my dad. Thank you for listening.
Please be seated. All blessing, honor, and works. Now, we're not gathered here today because Steve died, but we are gathered here today because he lived. Right? He lived, and your lives got to be a part of that life. So that was an extreme gift. So if you have words of those days with him, meals shared, holidays celebrated, any of those, right now is the time where you can share those. From where you're seated, or you can come up here with the microphone.
Can everybody hear me if I stay here? Can y'all hear me? I'm going to have a hard time following your word. I'm so proud of him. I think you really honored Dad with your words. And he painted a beautiful picture of the man that he was. And we've talked about that this week. We are the luckiest people alive to have had him in our lives. I was thinking of a way I could honor my dad. And I know if my dad were here, he would want to thank y'all. He would say, thank you for stopping by. He told us that at the hospital when we dropped him off. I told my brother 7 times, thank you for stopping by. But he would also want my mom to be honored today and recognized. He loved her. Her birthday was November 27th. It was November 27th. And he was not able to go get her a gift this year, so he and I talked